Yeah, it's recording now. So yeah, Sreekar Raghotham, he's a grad student at the University of Rutgers, New Jersey, and he's going to talk to us about reduplication and anaphors. Sreekar, before we begin, just want to clarify, do you want questions asked intermittently, or do you have slides where you stop for questions?
I don't have any slides as such, but you can interrupt whenever.
Okay. So
maybe at the end of every slide. If there are any questions, I'll take them.
Okay, so we'll bring them in as they come in. Okay, so over to you, Sreekar.
Yeah. Thanks. The title makes it clear. My talk is on reduplication and anaphors that are reduplicated. We'll mostly concentrate on Telugu, but I'll begin with a brief overview of what sort of reduplications are available in South Asia. I'm not sure if there's anyone here who is not familiar with the phenomena, like formally, but in case there is anyone, I'll just go through it and describe. It should take about 5 minutes. This is based on joint work with a colleague of mine, Livia Souza, and still work in progress. So we would appreciate any comments you have now towards the end. Okay. So reduplication is a broad category of phenomena, and it's, broadly speaking, it's repetition of all or part of a lexical item. Now we must be careful to differentiate reduplication, which is one sort of doubling with, say, double clitics or agreement, which more often than not looks like it is double segment of the pronoun or a name that it is double. One way of distinguishing these two is based on locality reduplication, where you repeat two things. The two items that are copies of each other aren't usually too far from each other. That's one way of differentiating, say, double critics with reduplication. But in the general case, when you look at something, you can tell whether it's reduplication or not. So people have intuitions about what is in these. Okay. So usually reduplication affects the meaning, but not always. This is just again a descriptive generalization. So on the left here, you have the classification, which I've simplified a little bit, that Anvita Abhi in her 1992 survey gives for the sorts of reduplications that are available in South Asia. So she makes two distinctions between lexical and morphological. Here I'll be using, I've just changed it to intra-word and supra-word because the words lexicon and morphology have changed over the years, and this is sort of pre-theoretic. So intra-word is basically, okay, we'll get to that. But first of all, can you see my cursor moving? Like, if I point to things?
Yeah, it's visible. We can
okay.
see it moving.
Okay. So we'll first look at expressives. Expressives are any vaguely double content. So basically, the individual parts have no meanings, and the only meaning that you can give is to the reduplicated complex as a whole. So for instance, Hindi has chatpada. So these are the examples that Abhi gives. So Hindi has the example chatpada, which is not exactly reduplicated. I mean, it doesn't seem like anything is copied here. Just there's a rhyme to it, but that's about it. And in Telugu, you have a karkara for crispy. So these are idiomatic items. They don't have meanings. The individual parts of the reduplication don't have meanings by themselves. And this is not to be confused with expressive content. So people use expressives as another term for things like honorification or some adjectives which have the speaker's attitudes that go along with it. For instance, the blasted garment is wreaking havoc. The blasted here is my attitude towards it. So people consider this expressive, and you shouldn't be confusing the two terms. Like always, there's a problem of terminology in Africa. Right. So the next sort of reduplication is echo formation. So echo formation is again another sort of rhyme. So here you have, it's best seen by way of example. So English, you have reduplication, reduplication. That's a way of forming. That's an echo formation. So what's happening here is that you add something or you replace something in the first syllable or some phonological segment of the base. So in English, you add shma, and in Hindi, you add v. So English to English, so movie. And this, and in Telugu, you have Pappu Gippu. So Dravidian has the gi that you add to your base, or I should say, replace the base's first syllable with V. And in Hindi, that's V, and in English, Shma. And this sort of phenomena is very productive. You can do it with pretty much any word you can think of, as opposed to the expressives we saw on the last slide, which are lexicalized, sort of fossils in your lexicon. I mean, people can come up with more of them, but as a general rule, they're not as then you have continuous reduplication. Continuous reduplication is, for instance, Tugde gang. Some of us are supposed to be part of the Tugde gang. And that's, it's continuous because the two things are next to each other. And it's continuous, which is classified under complete reduplication because it's the whole word that's being reduplicated, as opposed to echo formation where there's some part of the word that's removed. Then Hindi also has, this is also very productive. I'm just showing you some examples. Hindi has Dekhte Dekhte, as in some song. I was listening to it yesterday. Kya se kya ho gaye dekhte dekhte. So, like, if you keep listening to music, you'll find these examples in the wild pretty much all the time. And so here these are verbs that are being reduplicated. And I have a Telugu example for numerals that are reduplicated, rendu rendu, and you can do this in Hindi or any South Asian language as well, or at least most South Asian languages. This has a meaning of distribution, and that's what we'll concentrate on today, and that's why it starts. There's another sort of complete reduplication, and that's discontinuous. Discontinuous is basically reduplication that's where there is intervening material there. So in Hindi, you have kam se kam, jal se jal. I'm not a Hindi speaker, or you can find examples like this in your own language. My language is Telugu, so I'll tell you. Here, Anaphors have, this is one another, which is reciprocal. Here you have two indefinites that are separated by a case marker, and this would be descriptively termed discontinuous reduplication. Again, this is marked star because this is also something I'll be looking at today. This is what the title was alluding to, reduplication Anaphors. Okay, so one question we can ask is that we see all these sorts of reduplication. Like, is it possible that we can find a common meaning for all these sorts of reduplication? It seems very unlikely that we can do that, both cross-linguistically and within a language, because there's this wide variety of semantic effects that go along with reduplication. For instance, expressives are idiomatic, and how you go about deriving the meaning by composing the reduplicant in the base is not exactly straightforward. Okay. So, but it's also not the case that all reduplicated meanings are idiomatic. So echo formation does a very productive, and it has straightforward semantic behavior, and it's productive. It activates conceptually related items. So when I say in Telugu, if I say Pappu Gippu, then that is dal and other things. The other things could include anything that is related to pulses in the context. So if I'm a merchant, then it could be rice and soap and things of that sort. But if I'm eating, then it would be rice and vegetables. Then there's, so Abhi also documents various ways in which total reduplication is interpreted. For instance, reduplicated adverbs can signal simultaneity, iteration, continuation, and so on and so forth. Like I said, this book is largely classificatory, so it's a survey of what sort of meaning effects are available. It seems unlikely that these are hard and fast distinctions that you have to draw and can't derive them from elsewhere. For instance, the differences that you get between these sorts of meanings depends on what are the actions or properties of the verbs that are being reduplicated and the reduplicated adverbs that they are attached to. Or I should say the actions are properties of the verbs that the adverbs attached to. And another point about echo formation is that echo formation can actually extend beyond what we intuitively think of as a word. So you can say things like writing papers is not something I will tolerate in this class. And here the reduplicant is not a word, but it's actually a whole phrase where writing papers. And so again, the supra word is like a vaguely relevant term. Okay, so some other cases of what reduplication means, like I said on this slide about continuous reduplication, in some cases it signals distributivity. So there's a famous example. I think this is a song, I'm not sure, or a line from CID will say Chappa Chappa Chan Maro to mean like search every little place. So what this means is for each little place is such that there is a search operation that's conducted there. So you're reduplicating over, so you're distributing over little spaces so that you exhaust all the area that's available in the context. And in Telugu, you have example, Ganta Gantaku Mansagu, which is basically you're reduplicating R here. So take this medicine every hour. Again, so you're distributing it. So each hour is such that there's an event of medicine taking that goes on there. I will come back to this shortly. Reduplication can also signal exclusivity. So I can say World Matladunar is here. What this means is they spoke among themselves. So you can say, in fact, even in English, you see something along these lines, right? With emphatics, for instance. He himself wrote the paper, or he himself decided to do so and so. And three means something along this line. It's also curious that you have a verbal reflexive cone, and leads me to think that the reflexive and emphatics are related as they seem to be in many other languages. This is moving. Okay, yes. Finally, what my talk is about. So famously, most, if not all, South Asian languages have dependent indefinites that are formed by reduplicated numerals. I'll come to what it means to be a dependent indefinite. But so one example is Pillalu rendu kotulan chusaru. So the children saw two monkeys. In fact, this is fine in in fact, this is fine in most South Asian languages. You can try it out in your own language, and if it's not available, let me know or think about it. That's curious.
Sreekar, there's a question that's coming.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, if I have some words like zigzag, Kit Kat, wherein the vowel is changed in which region, I have no idea. You'd have to think about what the meanings of these things are. Like, does zag have a meaning by itself? Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I have no clue. Maybe this would just be some sort of idiomatic content if there is no meaning. And so you put it under the waste basket of, like, okay, yes, expressives. Thanks, Anja. Um,
Yeah, there's one more question. Do you want me to read it out?
Right. So, yeah, I saw the question. So, this is something I removed from the classification that Abhi gives. She has these sorts of compounds like, I mean, I don't know what Tanbadan is supposed to mean, but in any case, if this is a compound, like if, for instance, khana pina, if that's the same sort of example you have in mind, then you can think of them as a continuous reduplication, or at least that's what Abhi classifies them. But it seems to me that they're regular compounds and there's nothing reduplicated going on with them. So I'm not convinced that they should come under the general category of reduplication here. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, why don't you just go ahead and if they have a follow-up,
Right.
they can
Okay.
write in the chat.
Okay. Okay. Yes, it does. Okay. Where were we? Oh, yes. So the children saw two monkeys. So famously, is Rahul here? Anyway, so Rahul Valsu has this 2006 paper. It's excellent. Everyone should read it. It describes the sorts of readings that you get when you have reduplicated numerals. You have this sentence, the children saw two monkeys, has three readings. One is the children saw two monkeys each. So if there were two children, each kid saw two monkeys. That's what is called the participant key reading. So P stands for participant here. And then there's another reading where the children saw two monkeys at each time. So they're just sitting on a bench in a zoo, and every 20 minutes, there are like two monkeys that come to some enclosure, they jump around, and then they go back. So you can, after like about 1 hour, where you have three 20-minute intervals, you can describe the situation by saying, the children saw two monkeys. Now, similarly, if the kids are moving along, say, some sort of a display in the zoo where every 100 steps you see two monkeys, you can also describe this phenomena, this situation, by saying the children saw two monkeys. The second one is called the temporal key reading, and third is the spatial key reading. I just wrote L for location. It's called key because you can think of the key as something that opens up your big event. Let's suppose there was a children seeing monkeys event. So there's an event where you have children and these children see monkeys. Now you can split open this event into smaller sub-events where, based on some sort of contextually relevant criteria, and here the way you do that is either based on the participants. So if there are, say, two participants, then you can split open the event into two. So you can say for one participant, I'll have one sub-event, and the other participant, I'll have another sub-event. And if you have times, let's say you can split the time into three sort of homogeneous or heterogeneous chunks, then within these three chunks, you can see if the sentence holds true, and if so, that's what the key stands for, how you break open the event. So far, these are the three keys that have been described in the literature. I don't know if there are any more. If there are, please let me know. I don't know. I don't think that there are any, or I don't know that there should be any more. Okay. So why are they called dependent indefinites is because they are dependent. So they have an anaphoric requirement on something else. So when the subject is singular, there is no participant key reading. So if the example was Akhil saw two monkeys, which is a perfectly fine sentence in Indian English. Akhil saw two monkeys. I cannot say that split the event into two participants where half of Akhil saw something and half of Akhil saw something else. That's not possible. The only two readings that are possible are where you can split the event in terms of times or in terms of locations. Now, since you lose something here, if you lose a plural, so if you lose a plurality of some property of an event, you lose one key, and that makes the indefinite anaphoric. And similarly, we can also establish a time and place to see if the sentence is felicitous when you don't allow any variation in time, location, or participants. So in 6, you have at 8:46 a.m., which is around this time here. At 8:46 a.m. in this enclosure, Akhil saw two monkeys. This sentence is just bad because there is no meaningful way where I can test whether there were multiple two monkey seeing events. Right? So that's the dependent part of the dependent indefinite. There's also there's just indefinites because two monkeys is like indefinite. Now there's also a variation requirement that these dependent indefinites have. So it cannot be the case that all sub-events are ones where the same monkey pair was seen. So if I said Akhil saw two monkeys, it can't be the case that in the whole 1 hour or 2 hour window that you're considering, it's just the same two monkeys that are always present in front of his eyes. Then he didn't see two monkeys, he just saw two monkeys. So you need to have multiple monkeys, or it should be the case that the identity of the monkeys is not relevant at all. So you're not fixing the identity of the monkeys in your head, which is essentially the same thing as there being multiple monkeys. So the variation requirement is usually modeled as a constraint on the number of monkeys. So number of monkeys is greater than 2. When people sit down to formalize this requirement, how you formalize this varies across proposals. So for instance, in Rahul's early work, he said that this was not at issue content, but he was agnostic about what sort of not at issue content it was. And then you have Robert Henderson's paper, which talks about similar construction on Kapchikel. There they are modeled as post-suppositions. Post-suppositions, unlike presuppositions, are evaluated after the fact. So you do all the meaning computation that you want to do in the sentence, and then you evaluate that there are multiple monkeys or not. And Jeremy Kuhn's recent work also does something along these
lines. Sreekar, there's a question from Aisha. I'll just read it out because we're recording the talk and chat isn't.
Oh yeah, that's right.
In the recording. So she's asking, what happens if we give a time period? Example, over the last few hours, Akhil saw two monkeys.
That doesn't sound right to me. I don't know. Does that work for you? Yeah. Okay. Because so I think what's happened. Yeah, I think what's happening here is like you're fixing one chunk of time, and within that chunk of time, you have to evaluate. And I'm not sure that you can break it down into smaller chunks. At least that's the intuitive understanding. What's happening there formally is not something that's clear, but basically. Yeah, so the previous example that I gave was in 1 hour, you have these 20-minute chunks, but here if the example were over the last few hours, then the only relevant chunk that you have is the last few hours, so say the last 3 hours. And there's no more fine-grained distinctions that you can make within this, because you're forcing a uniform assessment of these last few hours. I think that's what's going wrong with this. Does it make sense? Okay, thank
Yes.
you. Okay, this slide is done. Okay, so Rahul also notes that when you reduplicate numerals, you can never distribute over the nouns they modify. So for instance, the example 7 monkeys ate 4 bananas. This sentence does not have a reading where each monkey ate 4 bananas, or each monkey pair ate 4 bananas, or each banana quadruple was eaten by a monkey pair. You just can't do it. So you can try it out with 4 monkeys, for instance. The way to test it would be to see if you exhaust all the members of your monkey set or your banana set. So here the example I have is with monkeys. So you have, let's say there are 4 monkeys, A, B, C, D. D is antisocial, does not like bananas. He's just like this oddball monkey in a corner all the time. So the A and B pair ate 4 bananas each. B and C pair ate 4 bananas each. No, I mean A and B, the 2 pairs ate 4 bananas each. So the set A and B ate 4 bananas, the set B and C ate 4 bananas. So in this case, if the sentence is true, then you cannot have then it shows that you don't have to exhaust it. And like the more important reading would be to say that you never need an exhaustified set of monkeys here. And that's what shows us that you don't distribute over the monkeys or the bananas. You can try it out. It'll probably take some time. You can do it in the sideline. There's not much left actually. So, okay. So here we noted that when you reduplicate numerals, you can never distribute over the nouns they modify. But when you distribute the noun itself, so when you reduplicate the noun itself, then you can distribute it. So if I say inti ki parcha bankano, that is, we send the pamphlet to each house. So here I'm reduplicating house, and there you're exhausting all the houses in a context inside, and then you're saying each house was such that we send the pamphlet to. This is also true and in fact very curious. I don't know if people have discussed this before, but when you reduplicate indefinites, which are also WH words, you need a pair list reading. So not in 9, but in 10. So in 9, when you have who ate fruits, it basically means who all ate fruits. So you need an exhaustive answer to this. So you need to list out everyone. Was any meaning possible in 7? Yes, so if you can break open so you have the temporal and spatial key readings that are available for it. So if you have, let's say these 4 monkeys, so the example I have here with ABCD, this is fine on a temporal key reading. Like, so if you had 2 different time intervals where A, B ate 4 bananas, and then B slightly moved over to C's enclosure, and then B and C ate 4 bananas. So the zookeeper gave, that's fine. Okay. Right, and 10 is something that's very curious and curious because I noticed that randomly while working on some on this, right? So not related at all. But if you reduplicate, say, the WH words in the multiple WH constructions, so who ate what, instead of saying who ate what, you say who ate what. Only the pair list reading is pair list answer is accepted, and there's no way you can do it in English in just one sentence, where you are forced to give a pair list. You'll always need a extra addition. So you say who ate what, give me a list of person and things that they ate, or something like that. So you need to uh, expand on what your question is in English if you're doing it with multiple languages. But in Telugu and possibly other languages, you have this way of forcing a pairless reading where you say who ate what. Okay, so we've seen a lot of examples where when you reduplicate, you see a distribution, but it's not the case that distribution and reduplication always go together. For instance, so we've already seen that reduplication does not always imply distribution. Now we'll see that distribution does not always need reduplication. So clearly some predicates distribute. So when I say the students walk, the students are intelligent. Here, these are the most salient readings, at least, where it's each of the students walked and each student is intelligent. It's not the case that the students as a whole walked. I mean, those cases are possible if you build the right sort of context.
So there are two questions. One from
Right.
Yangchen. She's asking, can you also say who are what in Telugu? Okay, 8
Yeah,
what,
it's eight.
right? Yeah, that makes sense. And so her the Kulkarni is asking, is kis kisne kya kya khaya okay to Hindi speakers, or is it kisne kya kya khaya? Okay, Aisha's answer.
Right. So the Hindi speakers should answer the second one. Aisha did. Thanks, Aisha. Okay. For Yangchen's question, what was that again? Who ate what? So that doesn't actually. It sounds a little odd compared to the double reduplication. But like in the Hindi example we had, किसने क्या क्या खाया, you can say who what ate. That's okay. But who ate what? I'm not sure. I mean, it doesn't have any meaning other than who ate what. Just who ate what with an exclusive uh, requirement, like mention all requirement. Yeah, that's right. So the only difference I can think of is who ate what, where if I just ask who ate what, it's possible that I can give or mention some answer. I can just choose what is contextually relevant for the questioner and then give an answer saying, oh, you like gulab jamun, this guy. But if I reduplicate it, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so you get a, okay. Mention all requirement when you reduplicate the first one. Okay. I find it out too. Yeah, it is slightly odd. I'm not sure what's going on. Kinjal has another question. Do you expect 10 to have a pairless reading given that reduplicated indefinites seem to otherwise pattern differently, like in 9? What do you, Kinjal, can you expand?
Yeah, hi, Shrikar. I was just wondering, like nine has this all reading, right? I mean, but
That's right.
you don't seem to to get that reading in 10. But is it because you have multiple WH reduplicated words, or I'm just wondering.
So you do get it in 10. So if I ask, so for instance, I have to exhaust all the people that are there. And then if they didn't eat something, I'll have to say they didn't eat something. But that's about it. There's no difference between how the who is interpreted in 9 and 10. I'm not sure if the what needs to be exhausted too in 10. Maybe that's the question you're asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sreekar, I also have a question in the same example 10.
Right.
So you have ever MME Tinaru, right?
Right.
Can you, so is there any potential reading that can be attributed to Everu Emmi Tinaru or Everu Emmi Tinaru? Are these constructions possible? And do they have some other reading?
That's the question Yang Chen asked. And this is to Anjali's point.
Right.
Someone's phone is on.
Yeah, if it's not, I don't know who else has it unmuted.
Right.
Yeah,
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Ever MM Tunaru is. So if you reduplicate one and not the other, where the other is a WH word, and like Yang Chen said, it is slightly odd. Why that should be the case is not something I know at the moment. I have to think about that, and I guess that's similar to what my answer to Kinjal's question would be, like why. So Kinjal, if I understand your question right, it's why is what not exhausted, or is what exhausted? If not, why not?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'll have to think about it. It's just an example I was looking at, and I thought it was interesting enough to put it in, but that's about it. I haven't thought about how you compose the meaning of these questions and what comes up, so on and so forth. Okay. I'm sorry, but I hope that's satisfying enough.
No problem. So Hema has a comment for Malayalam speakers, so that can be addressed separately in the chat. I think you have another question from Atish. If you say kisko jana, I think there's a question in front. Can you see the question?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, I can. So the I don't know if that's a question. Maybe it is. Kisko kisko jana hai or kisne kisne khaya. That's basically like 9. So you need everyone who wants to go, give me your name. So that the important part there is everyone who wants to go. And again, kisne kisne khaya, where everyone who ate, tell me the names of everyone who ate. So what's important there is the every, so distribute over the people who ate. And that's exactly what's happening in 9. Clearly, that's available in Hindi too.
Right. The question is, Aisha's rephrased it. The question is whether you can reduplicate with a case marker.
Yes, you can.
Right. Yeah. So
I mean, we don't have name because Telugu is nominative accusative, but yeah, sure. I mean, you can reduplicate the case marker. Okay.
Shubham has another question. In example 10, what is pair, and is it who what pair or who pair? Just
yeah, it's a who what pair. Basically, what you need in 10 is a list of people and the things they ate. So it's like a long list: X ate A, Y8B, Z8C, so on and so forth. And that's the list you want in 10. Does that clarify things? Okay, yeah, good. Some more comments. Okay, it's the Malayalam speakers. Okay, right. So I was saying something about distribution not being always dependent on reduplication. So some predicates distribute, but this is so the usual way of thinking about it is that there's like a covert distributivity operator, or the verb by itself comes with a distributor, or anything so on and so forth. I am agnostic about it. It's just a descriptive fact that some verbs favor distributive readings, but they also are okay with collective readings if you set up the right sort of context. For instance, it's a common trope in like movies and any sorts of comic media where you have three kids in a trench coat to look like they're tall and whatnot. And then if I say the students walk to describe that situation, that sounds okay to me. The students are intelligent. This could also be like a generic sentence, but the one available reading here is of distribution. Like each student is intelligent. The students praise the teacher. This one is not always distributed. So you can have, for instance, a committee of students that sat down and wrote a testimonial to your teacher. That could also be okay. And praise by the predicate praise does not favor one reading or the other. It's just agnostic to how you manipulate the student plurality. Then there are some where you definitely can't distribute. So the students are many. Then the couple of examples from Barry Shine. The students are 12, the students are numerous, things like this. None of these are, okay, the students are 12 could mean that each student is of 12 years, is 12 years old, but that's not what the relevant reading is. Students number 12. So students of many, you need a collective interpretation of the students. Right, so then there are also distributive quantifiers. So Prati is each in Telugu, English each, for instance, English each, English every. So these are all distributive quantifiers. So you can just have this and use them in for distributing over items. And then there are some modifiers. The students and the teachers sang and danced. So this example has a reading where the students and the teachers are one group. They sang and danced. But then you can add a modifier respectively to say, right, so the students and the teachers, so the students sang and the teachers danced, and what the respectively is doing is distributing over your plurality. Conjunction also has this odd effect where order matters. So the left conjunct goes with the left conjunct, the right conjunct goes with the right. Then reciprocals also distribute. So you can say the students cursed each other. So basically the set of, take the set of students, for each student, that student cursed some or all of the others. That's a possible reading. You don't have to distribute down to the atoms of students. Suppose you had 10 students, you can divide the students into groups of 5 each, and one group of 5 curse the other group of 5, and the other group of 5 curse the first group of 5. Even in this scenario, the students curse each other is okay. All you need to do is distribute it to some degree, not necessarily completely, to the atoms in your set. Okay, there's a lot of chatter in the chat box. Let's see what's going on.
Yeah, sorry about that. So there's just like
No, that's
discussion
okay.
amongst Malayalam speakers. So we've just discussing that it's not the same in Malayalam, in that we don't have the same kind of reduplicative adjectives used in Malayalam, but we can do it in Tamil just like Telugu.
Right, that's true. I think Rahul and Jayseelan have a paper, I cite them somewhere, where they discuss this fact. I think Malayalam does have something similar, however, our, in your genitive possessor. So if you want to distribute over, say, the students went to their houses, went to their respective houses, then there would be our. So why you
True,
can't
but I guess we can't do that in the WH sense. That's the example that we were discussing.
Okay, WH sense. All right, sorry about that. Okay. I don't know why. Can you tell me what the ukka means?
Oh, okay. So okka means it's a distributive. Okay, I think Hima, do you want to come in?
Yeah. Okay is in this it is functioning as a distributive quantifier, but lexically okay means it's some sort of a quantifier. Here it is distributive.
Okay.
So R okay is who all. Who, yeah, it's similar to who.
Okay. Can you just give me, like, just so I understand what's going on, can you give me an example where ukka is used without a WH word?
Yeah, Madhu.
Yeah, I think isn't it more like whoever rather than who all? I'm not sure whether there's
So
any
I get the distributive
difference.
reading that Hema is talking about with WH with okka, but you can also use, like Hema said, in the lexical sense, you can say okka parayam in the sense everything. I'll say everything, you know.
Yeah, agree.
So
Okay.
some sort of a
All right.
quantifying reading.
All right. This is a good lesson that XYZ in Dravidian is not a good idea. Anyway, so,
Yeah.
okay.
Malayalam's always the black sheep.
Right. I get, oh no, okay, fine. We've gone through this. Right, so I just spoke about reciprocals, and that's what I'll concentrate on, reciprocals and reflexives. It's going to be very brief, but you can always ask clarification questions. So reciprocals in Telugu, we already came across this in the intro slide for discontinuous reduplication. So reciprocals in Telugu are made up of two indefinites. So indefinite okaru, where the ru is the human classifier, and it's separated by a case marker. So you have pillal okaru nukar mechkunaru. What this means is the kids praise one another, each other. So what's happening here? You have these two indefinites, and in between you have a accusative marker. So it's usually assumed that the verbal reflexive cone is necessary for the okaru, like such a reduplicated form to occur, but at least in reciprocals, it's not always the case. 18, for instance, you don't overtly see it. Pillal okarto okaru godav the kids fought with one another. Now, I'm not sure whether the verbal reflexive is present on the verbal spine and it's just null in this case or not, but that's sort of irrelevant. The point here is to just look at the form of the reciprocal. You have two indefinites that are next to each other, almost next to each other, and in between you have some case markers. So here you have the commutative, where you have the accusative, you can have the locative, and you can have pretty much any other. When you have possessives, when the reciprocal is in the possessive. So for instance, if the children went to each other's houses, then the head noun comes in between. My guess is because it interacts, it's sort of like a blocking phenomena where the reciprocal reading is lost if that thing doesn't come in between, because you also have the distributive numeral reading that's also.
So 3 questions. Aisha has asked, is the case marker obligatory? Gargi is asking, so the verbal reciprocal is optional in Telugu, right? And yeah, Aisha has also a follow-up. So if you've unmarked accusative, then what?
Okay. You always get the accusative marker here. Like, so Telugu does have DOM, but here I'm trying to find, say, non-human, non-animate sort of antecedents and trying to use reciprocals. So the trees brushed against each other, something like that. Yeah, even then, like with trees, you don't always need accusative, but here you do. So it's always necessary. Not sure why. Did you have a follow-up, Anisha?
Okay, no, that doesn't seem like
Okay.
She just says, very interesting.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. I have no idea. One guess is basically, so there's this thing that happens in Lubukusu where you have the little v, and on either side of the little v, you have a reciprocal marker. So in between the little v and the big V, you have a reciprocal marker, and on top of the little v, you have a reflexive marker. So like Lubukusu clearly shows that reflexive and reciprocal occupy 2 different positions on the verbal spine. So Sapphire and Selvanathan have a paper on it that they want to extend it to, they have a manuscript where they try to extend the similar structural distinction between reciprocals and reflexives to Tamil, Singapore Tamil at least. I can send you the paper and maybe that's something going on there. Or at least that could be a good way to start looking at what's going on. Yeah, so
Follow-up
I mean, Kinjal says, follow up to Aisha's question, can you try constructing a sentence with 2 cars colliding? Sorry, Anjali, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, please go
yes.
ahead. It makes my job easier.
It's the, no, I mean, you still need an accusative marker. Like I said, the trees brushed past each other, they brushed against each other. Same thing. You need accusative all the time, or some sort of marker.
Right, so that's clarified. Sreekar, you can go ahead.
Okay, there's one more question from Gargi. So the verbal reciprocal is optional in Telugu. I don't think so. It depends. As long if the reciprocity is directly related to the verb's content, right? So I was like, if the reciprocal is in the object position, then you need to have it. You can have adjuncts, reciprocals in adjuncts where you don't need it, but again, that's, you wouldn't expect that the verbal reciprocal is needed in that case either. So my guess is here in 18 is that like there's some allomorphy going on where you have a null cum, because even when you have singular antecedent, you get a reduplicated reflexive, and that's usually a good test to see whether kun, the verbal reflexive, exists in Telugu or not, because when it doesn't exist, then you don't need to reduplicate your singular reflexive. In all other cases, you just have one item. No, you
Yangchen
can't.
has
That's
a
what
hand.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Yangchen has a
Yeah.
hand raised. I'm just wondering if that was old or. Yang, do you want to come in?
I think Sreekar just answered my question. I was just wondering if you guys have a separate reciprocal marker on the verb and a separate verbal reflexive, but that's not the case,
No.
right? It's the
No,
same.
no.
Yeah.
They're the
Yeah.
same. It's cool. Gargi has a follow-up. Can you use con in 18? No, you can't. Why? So can you use it in 18? No, you can't. But why can't you use it? That's not something I'm sure of. If I were to take a guess, which I don't want to, anyway, if you want, I can take a guess, but I don't want to. All right. So this is just any more questions? Can you drop the nominal reciprocal and use kun? Do you mean in 18?
Yeah.
No, you can't. In any case, you can never do that because kun is not a reciprocal marker or a reflexive marker. So the way we've thought about it, Livia and I mean, I haven't mentioned it here, but I suppose it came up, so I can mention it, is that kun is actually underspecified, and that all it's saying is that the antecedent, like the agent and the theme, for instance, are the same items, and what the internal relation between the agent and the theme is open to interpretation. So if I said 17 is actually a very good example because it shows what all kun can do. So if let's say I remove the reciprocal here, so pillalu mechukunnaru, that's a fine sentence. It can mean multiple things, right? So it can mean the kids praise themselves. It can also mean the kids praise one another. It can also mean that the kids praise someone, but the praising happened internally. Like they're this hard taskmaster, they're very proud of their students, but they don't want to tell them. Okay, kids don't have students, but you know what I mean. So even when the location is internal to the agent, you can have it. And the way you disambiguate between these sorts of multiple readings is by adding a reflexive or a reciprocal with the relevant case markers attached. Does that make things clearer?
Yeah, it should. There's no follow-up question, so.
Okay, I hope so.
Yeah.
Right. So Subbarao and Ardhamurthy have this paper from 99 where so Subbarao has a long list of papers where he thinks of these as reduplicated anaphors, and that's the intuition I have, and that's what I'll follow. The idea here is these two are reduplicated, so you copy this. One curiosity is here is I haven't shown this, very convenient. But in 18, when I have a dative subject construct, a dative subject, then the second part of the reduplicated complex also needs a dative subject. But what the syntax of this is and how this is working is something I have no clue about right now. I'm just thinking of how we can like draw parallels between the semantics of reciprocals and the semantics of distributive reduplication so that we can at least make some sense of a general phenomena of reduplication on the meaning side. 19 and 20 basically have like one sort of example. So in English, you can have the boys hit each other. Can we paraphrase as, so it has multiple readings, the boys hit each other, and each of those multiple readings can be paraphrased in one way or the other by using each and the other. So you can say the boys each hit the others, where each boy hit the others, but you can also say the boys each possibly with some others hit some of the others, where you can get these intermediate group sort of readings. The difference here is, so if these were actually, so in 18 of the two items were actually independent morphemes that you can scatter across your tree to establish scope of, let's say, the distribution, for instance, you would expect them to look the same, modulo morphology, things of that sort, modulo allomorphy, I mean. But that's simply not possible, so you can't do it. So when I have to establish that the scope of each is here the boy, because that's the antecedent, so each boy hit another boy, then you'd use the reduplicated numeral one. So if you've been following along, and hopefully you are, then you'll realize that when you reduplicate numerals, you don't distribute over the noun it modifies. That's not the case with one. Here it's behaving like a indefinite determiner, not a, excuse me, not a numeral. But if you add the human classifier root to the one, then in that case you can get your regular numeral sort of behavior. And in that case, you can't distribute over boy, and this won't mean much because there's nothing to do with it. I mean, it would have the temporal key reading. But in any case, the takeaway from the slide is that reciprocals are reduplicated, and similarly, reflexives are also reduplicated. Here I have a dative subject construction. The only difference between a reciprocal and a reflexive is that in reflexives, the base is a pronoun, and in reciprocals, the base is an indefinite. So in 21, you have the kids praise themselves. So you have two pronouns here, tama and tamu. This is vaguely, this is diachronically related to the tan, which is like a superstar Dravidian Anaphor. But at least in Telugu, there's good reason to think of these as third-person pronouns and not like anaphors. Anyway, so here you have your pronouns, and in 22 you have a dative subject construction, and like I was saying on the previous slide, when the antecedent is in the dative, the second, so you can call it the base, and then the base has the dative subject that goes along. So this is usually called case copying, because that's what's happening here. But how exactly the syntax of this works and why you need the case to copy is not clear at all. So I'm not going to comment on that. Right, so what is all this leading up to? So our suggestion is that distributive reduplication and anaphors are alike. So basically the same sort of behavior in the semantics. So they distribute over their antecedent. So in distributive reduplication, if you had a plural subject, then the distribution can be over the participants. Otherwise, it's over some other event property. So here they are distributing over an antecedent of the person. And anaphors have just one antecedent. That's the antecedent of the anaphor. And that's what you distribute over. Then the second similarity here is that the distributivity is encoded on, so this is our claim, that the distributivity is encoded on the reduplicated complex. So there are two ways people usually think about it. So either that there is a covert distributive operator on the verbal spine or somewhere in the syntax. Alternatively, you can think that the things that are being distributed over are what bring the distributive operator. And that's the choice that Rahul makes as well as Hume does, and that's what we do too. And it helps us explain some other properties of anaphors that are cross-linguistically stable. So since the delta is the distributive operator. Okay, before I move on, Aisha has a question. What happens when you have a possessive reflexive? Right, so when you have a possessive reflexive, what happens is, if you want to distribute, you reduplicate it. If you don't want to distribute, you have like a regular, just a single reflexive pronoun. So the boys went to their house. All the boys have one house. The boys went to their houses. Then there is the, basically, you won't have any of these pronouns coming in between. There's no case copying or anything of that sort. The case copying only happens when there are arguments in the, when there are arguments of the verb. So if you have these in the object position, and only then you get this case copying. Okay. Hope that's clear. There's a follow-up I'll be happy to answer. Right, so since the distributive operator is only over the complex, it does not scope over anything else other than what's in the reduplicated complex, and that is the anaphor and the antecedent in both these cases. And it's actually a welcome result, as some people have argued that in fact the empirical landscape of reciprocals is such that you shouldn't, you don't want to distribute over anything else, because then you have like undergeneration issues. We can go over it if you're interested. Reciprocals, so the only difference between reciprocals and reflexives in the semantic is that reciprocals have a non-identity condition on two variables. So the idea here is that the antecedent introduces a variable, and that's what the superscript here is supposed to indicate. Then the reciprocal is anaphoric to the antecedent, and that's what the subscript is supposed to indicate. But then not only does the reciprocal have an anaphoric requirement, it also introduces its own index into your list of assignments. And what the condition that reciprocals have is that X and Y should not be identical. And X and Y should not be identical, not globally. Globally, that's just not possible globally, because those two are co-construed, like they have the same reference. So the difference has, so the non-identity condition where it applies is under the scope of the distributivity operator. So let's suppose you have a list of boys, A, B, C, D, E, and then you let that pass through a distributivity operator. What it does, it basically behaves like a pasta machine. It cuts your big strip into multiple smaller strips. And that's where you test whether X and Y are identical or not. If they're identical, then they're thrown away. And if they're not identical, then they're kept. And that's what reciprocals do. Reflexives have an overlap condition. It's basically the same thing. Instead of identity, what you're saying is that X and Y have to overlap under this distributive operator. It's overlap and not identity, because you can interpret reflexives as you can get collective interpretations too. So the boys rewarded themselves, where the committee of boys gave awards to each individual boy in the committee, some sort of like an in-house award ceremony. And you want to not exclude these sorts of readings, and that's why you have this overlap condition, not an identity condition. So this is a very intuitive overview of what our proposal is. I have a few slides on the formalism, but it's on the appendix, and you can ask me about it. Yeah, happy to go over it. Now, the tricky part here is the singular reflexive. Singular reflexives reduplicate too. Like I was telling Gargi in a couple of other slides previously, it makes sense to say that you have these plural reflexives and reciprocals where they are distributed because they're plural, right? So there are multiple members of that plurality. But how does it make sense to say that singular reflexives reduplicate too? Like why? If the claim here is that reduplication and distributivity go together, at least in the nominal domain, then how does it make sense to say that singular reflexives reduplicate? Why does this happen? I don't have a strong answer to it, but the hunch here is that the verbal reflexive cone, it requires reduplication. It depends on, depending on where it attaches or which aspect of the event it's modifying. So cone is like one of these markers that can attach at multiple different places on the spine. If it's really low, then you just can't add anything. And most of the very low ones are thought of as like fossilized remains and some historical fossils. For instance, a good example would be think. The verb think is basically say plus cone. Like you say something to yourself. But it's really low. There's like it doesn't have a reduplication requirement. Like it doesn't add any other arguments, or it doesn't detransitivize it. Doesn't do anything that cone does regularly when it's higher up. In 26 and 27, you have an example of this reduplicated singulars. You have two different morphemes here. One is an accusative, the other is locative, and there's nothing else that's changing here. And the meaning changes depending on the case that this reduplicated morpheme takes. And my guess is the cone is actually attaching at two different heights. Like one is the regular reflexive place, and the other is where you modify like some sort of location, or where locative adverbs go somewhere around there. So if this hunch is right, that the reduplication is necessary because of this cone, then the distribution is redundant, but it's only redundant. It doesn't hurt anything. So that's that. Yangchen, is that a question? New question? Was that a question?
Yeah, Yangchen, did you just?
Yeah, I just did. I was actually curious about your kun story. So you're saying essentially that it's kun which necessitates the reduplication of of your pronoun, right? Well, the anaphor in this case, isn't it? Is that what you? That's what you were saying, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So the problem is that we have these reduplicated anaphors across Dravidian in the object position, and but we don't have kuns in all the Dravidian languages. So we don't have verbal reflexives, say in Malayalam, but we have the same reduplication. And the distinction that you actually see is that the reduplication, which in the literature is called a complex anaphor, I mean, that's just a morphological description, really. It comes in a complement position. It comes sort of in an object position. You're not going to get it in, say, a possessive. right? And I think the Telugu possessive is also is not reduplicated, right?
That's right, but can you get it in adjuncts?
Yeah, you do. You get it in adjuncts as well. So you can. So essentially, any non-spec TP position would give you a reduplicated anaphor, or well, in Malayalam you can either get a pro self form or a self form. If you get what I mean, you can either get
Right.
pronoun self, or you can get self. And you have self over here. I don't know whether Telugu can do pronoun self. Can you also
No, it
say?
can't. So I think the difference is that the way Tan behaves in Malayalam is very different to the way Tan behaves in Telugu.
Yeah, yes, it does. I mean, so I guess if you can't, but the reduplication thing is interesting because it happens across Dravidian.
That's right.
Yeah.
So do you have like any verbal reflexive?
No. Okay, so we do. Well, we have a fossilized kol which is very active in Tamil. So we have a fossilized kol, but it doesn't really do any reflexive a job of a reflexive, because you can use it with pretty much any verb, and it's not restricted to verbs. Like in Tamil, I think you use it primarily with the typical reflexive predicates, like what wash and I don't know, sleep, etc. Or I'm not sure, a Tamil speaker can probably clarify that, but in Malayalam, well, it doesn't. You don't have an active verbal reflexive, is the point. Yeah. So, the thing that you pointed out about Kol doing the reduplication, Kol is obviously doing the reflexivizing. It's what necessitates you to have a reflexive in that position, but I'm not quite sure if it necessitates the reduplication.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying, because it's a very old story that reflexivity is a property of the predicate. This is pretty established, that the reflexivity property, whether you generate a reciprocal or a reflexive, will come from the verb. But I don't think it necessarily results in building a reduplicated reflexive or reciprocal.
Okay. All right. Two things. When you have Kun, you don't need anything. Aisha has a cryptic morphology is not the syntax, is the message. Can you expand on that, Aisha? Okay, anyway, so first of all, I'm not saying that Kun always a need. So I'm not saying that Kun has a theta grid that says, give me a reduplicated noun. That's not the case, because you can do Kun without any of these reflexive or reciprocal markers, right? So it just removes one argument. But when you do have an argument that like clarifies between, say, pure reciprocal reading or reflexive reading, or some other sort of reading where one aspect of your event is, say, co-construed with another participant, with the antecedent, for instance, and that's when you need these reduplicated material to disambiguate. So that's one. And the second reason why I say this is because, unlike Tamil, I think, so I'm not sure about Malayalam, but I think you can have just the Tan in object position with Kun in Tamil.
Yeah, I was just about to say that, yeah, and you get the reflexive meaning.
Right,
You don't have,
that's
yeah.
right. And that just doesn't work for me. So, I mean, I've seen Telugu grammar saying that's okay. It's not okay for me. So I just don't know what to make of it. I mean, variation has to be studied independently. For now, I'm working with my grammar. So the reason.
Sorry, Sreekar, speaking of variation, Anupama had messaged me privately just a comment about her variety. She speaks the Kannur variety of Malayalam, and she seems to say that you can do the WH reduplication in her variety to mean whatever.
Nice.
So you can say അവരൊക്കെ എവിടെ എവിടേക്കോ പോയിരുന്നു, which would mean they went wherever, if I'm right. And you can do the same thing for what as well. So നീയൊക്കെ എന്തെന്തൊക്കെ കാണിച്ചാലും എനിക്ക് കുഴപ്പമില്ല, which means no matter what you do, whatever you want, whatever you do, it doesn't matter. So you can reduplicate the WH form in that to give
Right.
that whatever, wherever sense.
I think I heard an O at the end. Is that the case?
Yes,
is there
yes,
more?
yes.
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's the same thing that happens in Telugu.
Okay.
Like when you add the O, it becomes an indefinite. So then that's when you have this.
So one change also, the first example, which is the reduplication of the where, evade evadekyo, but the second example is endendokka. So you don't have the O in that to mean whatever, but you have the O in the wherever sense.
Okay, but right. So and then okay, so you not only are you reduplicating it, you also have the okka there.
Yes, that's what is interesting about her variety. I can't do this in my variety, but yeah.
Okay.
You have both okka and the reduplication.
Yeah. Sorry, Yanchin, I feel like I missed your question completely in all of this. Can you? I said something about kun not requiring reduplication. What next?
Yeah. It was just an observation that I am not quite sure if the the verbal reflexive marker in across languages can be argued to lead to the reduplication. So I get your point. You were saying that you are probably arguing it more so because of cases where you have distributed readings, right?
Right.
The boys cursed themselves.
Right.
But then again, you run into languages like Malayalam, and somebody has pointed out it's the same in Toda, where you get a distributive reading and you don't have an overt verbal reflexive.
That's good, because the way I have set things up, the verbal reflexive doesn't do anything. Like it has like a very weak meaning. It just says that the plurality of the boys, the plurality of the agent is the same as the plurality of the theme. And multiple sorts of readings are possible in that case. And which sort of reading you want is dependent on the context. And that's actually a good thing, I think, that Malayalam and Toda don't have it. It's also not necessary in Telugu. But, okay.
So then are you arguing that it's the distributivity is dependent on? I think I misunderstood you probably. Then are you then arguing that the distributivity is dependent on kol or kon?
No, that the distributivity is dependent on the reduplication of these nouns. So the point someone made in the slide, the Gargi made in the slide, is that Malayalam and Toda are the only Dravidian languages which don't have a verbal anaphoric device. By that I understand it to mean kol.
Yeah.
Right. So the distribution that you're getting is because of the reduplication, not because of. So collective readings, distributed readings, none of that are coming from the verbal reflexive, the kun. The kun is just saying,
yeah, of course, yeah,
these two things are okay. And it's so the semantics is set up in such a way that it's the context that helps us decide which way or the other this thing goes. Like I'll tell you, let's see. Okay, I have an appendix, but before that, I just want to finish this. I have